all today. I'm wondering how many of you have heard of forest bathing before? And then that was my next question. Is your depth of knowledge go beyond hearing of it, or kind of just hearing of it, or maybe I know a little bit? Yeah, okay. Well, I am a certified forest therapy guide with the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, and I'm just really honored to be able to guide people here in Central Oregon in deepening connections to the forest and to the nature around. It's a really beautiful practice, and I'm excited to share it with you today. So a couple of things, just what we're going to go over today. Forest bathing defined, what it is, where it originated from, and how forest therapy is starting to gain momentum in the US. I'm going to talk a little bit about a hypothesis called biophilia and our forest home. I'm going to go over the psychological and physiological benefits of forest therapy and the research that backs that, the research that shows us that. I'm going to also talk about ecosystem impacts, practicing on your own, and then practicing with a guide. So I have some quotes embedded throughout. This is one of my favorites. In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks. And that was by John Muir. And one of the things that really stands out to me with this quote is the word with, in every walk with nature versus walking in nature, which really is at the depth of what forest bathing is. So I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about the biophilia hypothesis. And is anyone familiar with Edward O. Wilson? No. So Edward O. Wilson, he's a conservation biologist. He actually is a specialist that studies ants, has spent his life studying ants. And he writes wonderful, wonderful books. So if you're interested in reading about nature, learning a little bit more about our world, he's a wonderful author. And this term was coined by Edward O. Wilson in 1984. He actually published a book called Biophilia. And during the past 7 million years, so the basis of this comes from, during the past 7 million years of human evolution, 99% of our time was spent outdoors, right? We were outdoors all the time. So our bodies are adapted to that natural environment. So this biophilia, this is love. Bio is life. Philia is that attraction. So like love of life, attraction to life. So love of life and the living world. And this is it's a hypothesis that was written as the human tendency to interact or be closely associated with other forms of nature. It's a desire or tendency to commune with nature. And feel free to take pictures of my slides if you want to keep some of this information. I'm totally okay with that. And feel free to toss out questions whenever you feel like you have something you're curious about. So when Edward O. Wilson coined this term, it was really thought about as we're drawn to nature because that's our survival, right? So we love nature because that's how we survive. So in this very innate way, we feel comfortable, we feel safe, we feel content in nature. And when we think about children, they're very comfortable in nature, right? Kids are on the ground getting dirty, they're touching everything, they're playing with everything, right? And so when we're young, this is something that we're really comfortable with, and that's something that's really innate, right? It's in us. And then as we start growing older, maybe even as young children, the social norms of our world get in the way of this connection. Like, oh, honey, don't play in the dirt, right? Like, it's dirty, it's not good for you. And sometimes that connection can get lost along the way as those norms are established. So forest bathing is a way to reestablish this vital connection. So forest bathing is about being part of nature, being a part of this connection. So what exactly is forest bathing? So what forest bathing is and what forest bathing is not. No bathing suit required. So when we talk about forest bathing, and I get the question a lot, like, do I need to bring a bathing suit? And I love hot springs, I love swimming in the lakes, like I totally get that, but that's not what we're talking about, right, with forest bathing. So forest bathing is actually referring to bathing in the forest atmosphere, and it's specifically a group of chemical compounds called phytoncides, and I'm going to get all into the science behind that, get into just a little touch of organic chemistry in a little bit, but that's what it's referring to. So it's referring to being out in that forest atmosphere. So the definition of forest bathing that I like to share, there's a couple of really big key points to forest bathing. One is that it's sensory based. So the effects of it can be very similar to a meditation or mindfulness practice in the fact that it's calming, but the way that we get there is through sensory connection, not through that work with our minds. So this is an experience that utilizes sensory practices to develop a mind state in which our participants slow down and immerse themselves into outdoor surroundings. It's not just being in a place, it's being in a state of mind. It's being open to that space in a unique way. Forest bathing deepens connections with self, with the more than human world and other human beings. So I'll talk a lot about the human world, and that's all of us wonderful, beautiful people. And then the more than human world is everything else in nature, not necessarily living. So it can be rocks, water, it can be the soil, right? So living and non-living things out in nature. Forest bathing relaxes the body, it relaxes the mind, and it allows space for restoration and healing. And I've got some more here. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. So it's when I guide, and I'll get into this a little later about how that looks, I offer invitations, but there's no right or wrong way to take that invitation. So it can be whatever your heart's guiding you to do. The forest is the healer, and the practice opens up the doors. There's a little saying in forest therapy among us guides, and that is that the forest is the healer, and we're just going to open up the doors to that experience, to that healing that the forest has to share. You can practice on your own, you can practice with a guide, and I'll discuss both of these a little bit later. And I have been so honored to guide many participants, many clients here in Central Oregon, and 100% of clients, I give a survey after I guide, have reported feeling calmer, more grounding, more relaxed than before starting. 2 hours is all it takes, and it is recommended that you practice once per week, although the benefits that are shown, the physiological benefits, are shown to last up to 3 weeks. So I know sometimes it's hard for everyone to get out there once a week. So I say, well, if you can get out there once a month and just have this intentional time with nature, that would be adequate. That would be enough. You can practice anywhere. You can practice in an urban park. You can practice in your backyard. It is always a different type of practice if you're away from the human world and from some of those human noises and things like that. But you can really practice this anywhere. You can practice in your house with your house plants, honestly, so just wherever you are. And there's many research-based benefits, really cool, some of the science that's come out to show that this is a beneficial practice for us, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So I would like to share a little meditation with you, if that's okay. And this meditation, obviously it's not going to be exactly like a forest bath, but it's meant to give a visualization similar to a forest bath. So I did bring some essential oil with me. This is a coconut oil with a little bit of cedar and a little bit of pine. So once we get started, I'm going to ask you if you'd like oil to open up your hand when I walk around, and I'll just drip a couple of drops onto your palm. And you can rub your hands together and then bring that up to your nose and inhale the scents of the forest. So I'd like you to start by making yourself really comfy. Relaxing your body, maybe letting go of tension in your jaw, your forehead, your shoulders. Just start noticing how breath is moving in through your body, deepening your breath, expanding your inhale, lengthening your exhale. And take a few deep, full breaths just like that. And I'm going to come around with the oil. If you'd like some, please hold out your hand, and I'll drop a couple drops on there. You're welcome. You're welcome. And rub your hands together. And then gently bring your hands to your nose. Close your eyes. Deeply inhale the scents of the forest. Let's take 2 more deep breaths, inhaling those scents. And then I'll start our forest visualization. Imagine yourself walking on a path through a forest. The path is soft beneath your shoes, a mixture of soil, fallen leaves, pine needles, and moss. As you walk, your body relaxes and your mind clears more and more with each step you take. Breathe in the fresh mountain air, filling your lungs completely. Now exhale. Breathe out all the air, feeling refreshed. Take another deep breath in, revitalizing, and breathe out completely, letting your body relax further. Continue to breathe slowly and deeply as you walk through the forest. As you walk, you feel your muscles relaxing and lengthening. As your arms swing in rhythm with your walking, they become loose, relaxed, and limp. Feel your back relaxing as your spine lengthens and the muscles relax. Feel the tension leaving your body as you admire the scenery around. As you continue to walk through the forest, you begin to climb up a slight incline. You easily tread along smooth rocks on the path, feeling at one with nature. The breeze continues to blow through the treetops, but you are sheltered on the path, and the air around you is calm. Small saplings grow at the sides of the path. Around you is an immense array of greens. Some of the leaves on the trees are a delicate light green. Some leaves are deep, dark, true forest green. Many trees have needles that look very soft. The forest floor is thick green moss. Taller trees are growing on either side of the path as you walk along. Picture the variety of trees around you. Some have smooth white bark. Others are darker with coarse, heavy bark, deeply grooved. Enjoy the colors of the bark on the trees. White, tan, brown, red, black, many combinations of color. You admire the rough brown bark of pine trees and enjoy the fresh pine scent. Maybe take your hands back up to your nose and take a deep breath in. Smell the forest around you. The air is fresh and filled with the scent of trees, soil, and mountain streams. You can hear the sound of water faintly in the distance, the gentle burbling sound of a creek. As you continue to walk, you are gaining elevation and getting closer to the running stream. Continue to enjoy the forest around you. Up ahead is a large, smooth rock, like a chair waiting for you to rest. The rock is placed perfectly high up on this beautiful vantage point. Sit or lie down on the rock if you wish. It is very comfortable. You feel comfortable and at ease. The sun shines down on you. Looking around, you see mountains in the distance, faint and blue. You can look down from your vantage point into a valley with trees and a brilliant blue lake. Across from you, another mountain. The clearing around is made up of rocks, soil, pine needles, moss, and grass. The grass and mountain wildflowers around you blow gently in the breeze. A deer quietly emerges from the edge of the forest. The deer raises its head to look at you. You can see its nostrils moving to catch your scent. The deer cautiously walks to the stream to drink before disappearing back into the forest. Squirrels dart in and out of sight as they romp through the trees. You feel the warm sun on your body as you relax on the rock. You enjoy the majestic landscape around, and you feel your body relaxing even more. You continue to breathe the clean, fresh air. You feel so relaxed, so calm, at peace, in unity with nature around you, enjoying the sights, sounds, and smells of the forest. Feel the sun warm your skin, the gentle breeze blow across your cheek. Listen to the birds singing, the stream flowing, the leaves rustling, the squirrels chattering. See the flowers, trees, valleys, and mountains around you. You lay back on the comfortable rock and can see the blue sky above, small white clouds gently floating across the sky. Enjoy this peaceful place. When you are ready to awaken, start by deepening your breath, finding gentle movement in your fingers and toes. And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes. And I'll give you all a minute before I continue with the presentation. Okay, now that I put everybody to sleep, oh, I hope you guys enjoyed that. So obviously out in the forest, it's really different, but that's what it's like. It's that visualization was guiding us through our senses, right? Through smell, through hearing, through what we were seeing. So that's what forest bathing is about. It's about being in our bodies, in our senses. So I want to talk a little bit about the origins of forest bathing. And if anybody were to ask me, when did forest bathing start? My answer would be, well, it started when humans started walking on this planet, right? We've been forest bathing forever. It's just recently that we've become more disconnected with the natural world. So forest bathing was started, the term was coined in Japan in 1982. And in Japan, it's called Shinrin Yoku, which literally translates to forest bath. So it was started by the Japanese government, and the reasoning was that they wanted to mitigate some of the diseases, some of the illnesses that they were seeing in their populations, specifically cancers. So they were seeing a lot of their population coming down with cancers, and they wanted to help to fix that. Forest bathing was an intuitive thought. The thought was, well, we should be outside, right? It's better for us to be outside. So that's where that practice was cultivated from. It seems right that the forest acts as healing space for us humans. And I think like we live in a very foresty outdoors town, and I think if you asked most people who lived here, they would agree that there is a healing presence in the forest. It's a place we go to rest our minds. It's a place we go to experience wonder, to experience awe. And at times, especially here in Bend, a lot of people who are active will go out in the forest and push their bodies, right? Bike riding, running, kayaking, whatever that might be, skiing, and accomplish some pretty amazing feats. So no matter how we spend our time, it just seems right to be out in the forest. So the essential practice of forest therapy is, well, could there be something more to this, right? Could there be something more to being in this forest? And I've got a quote up there from Dr. Ching Li. And Dr. Ching Li is definitely the scientist who's brought out a lot of the recent research in forest therapy and how it affects us physiologically and psychologically. And there's a quote up there saying, nature is not separate from mankind in Japanese culture, it is a part of us. And that's really the essence of forest therapy, that nature is a part of us. I need to definitely say that the science behind forest therapy is really new. Really, the research started in the 2000s. In the vast wealth of science that we have behind us, that's a really short amount of time, right? So while the research has been wonderful, there's so many good things that have come out of it, we are just still at the beginning of really learning about the impacts of being outside are going to really be for us. So the clicker is a little sticky. There we go. So forest bathing in Japan, it's something that is done. It's something that's in not just Japan, Korea, China, and other countries surrounding. It's something that's done, and there's dedicated areas for it. It's prescribed by doctors. It's something that's really taken seriously as a preventative medicine practice. I was really happy to hear, I had a friend tell me a couple weeks ago that there's a pediatrician in Portland who's prescribing forest bathing for their patients. So I was like, that's really cool to hear. In my experience, I've talked to a lot of people, and just in the past year, many people have never heard of forest bathing, or if they have, they're like, I've heard of it, but I really am not quite sure what that means or what it's about. So I'm going to definitely clarify what this means here in the rest of this presentation. And while forest bathing is becoming more common internationally, and it is fairly common in other places, it's really new to the United States, like 2010, less than 15 years, and just starting to really gain momentum in the last 5 years or so. Where am I clicking this to? There we go. Is it just being sticky? What's that? Is this where you want to be? Okay. Well, oh no, I want to go, wait, no, it is where I want to be. Okay. It's just really taken me a long time to click it. It's all good. Okay. So I really love this quote. It's clear that our bodies still recognize nature as our home, and that's what we're going to get into right now. If I can click it forward. Are you pointing at the laptop? I am. That's where I was, but it's not working. There we go. Maybe if we shift it a little bit.
It might be because it's online.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's fine. It's fine. I just still have patience with it. Yeah. Thank you. So for a forest home, so I want to talk about a little bit about evolution of humans and urbanization. Earliest human houses are dated back to 1.8 million years ago, and these weren't really houses. They were kind of like these areas that maybe had some little rock walls around, but nothing that was completely surrounded. And first houses that folks can all agree on, that scientists can agree on, is that the first permanent dwellings are about 9,000 years old. So these are permanent dwellings that were still really small, but actual permanent dwellings that kind of look like houses today, right? Except way smaller. So even then, in that time, humans were still predominantly outdoors. We weren't spending our time in these small little spaces that were our shelters. So the first actual urbanization is thought to have occurred a couple thousand years past the first houses. And just 200 to 300 years ago, only a small percent of our populations were living in cities. Now 54% of populations are living in cities. That's expected to rise to 68% by 2050. Even some of these areas that we might consider a little more not city-ish are becoming cities, example, right where we live, right? So when considering evolution of humans, our DNA is still believed to be adapted to the outdoors, and that's part of that biophilia hypothesis as well. So not in houses, not in urban settings, definitely not to electronics. And one of the things I think about is, you know, when we're indoors, we're filtering our air, right? We're not really breathing this outside air, which a lot of the forest benefits have to do with those phytoncides, that chemical compound I talked about a little bit ago. So when we're outside, we're getting that connection, we're getting that contact to these chemicals. So coming back to our forest home provides us with what our body needs, both psychologically and physiologically. I wonder if maybe the batteries are going, yeah, possibly. So I'm going to go into the science of forest bathing a little bit, and thank you for being patient as I'm trying to get my clicker working. Could you move it forward for me? Oh, I got it. So benefits of forest bathing. So I'm just going to share some with you. There's more, and a couple more come up later in the presentation as well. But one of the most amazing ones, when I started digging into the research, I put that in order. Number one was that we have seen an immunity boost after people have spent time out in the forest. So specifically NK1 cells, natural killer cells, these cells, they gobble up. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. So they gobble up cells that are diseased, cells, specifically cancer cells, and we've measured, and there's a couple different ways that things have been measured. Before forest bathing, after forest bathing, urinary samples, saliva samples, sometimes blood samples are taken, and they've found a 20% increase in NK1 cells after forest baths, and that increase has been found to last 3 weeks post forest bathing. So pretty cool. Relief of stress and anxiety. While this seems really obvious to me, like we go outside, our heart rate's going to go down, right? Like we're going to relax. One of the cool things is that urinary adrenaline and non-adrenaline cortisol was tested. Also, cortisol levels were tested in saliva before and after forest bath, and there's a reduction of cortisol levels after forest bathing. And cortisol is our stress hormone. So that hormone, that chemical, has been visibly reduced after forest bathing. It improves mood in a profile of mood states test, and this is a pretty common test that's used. Forest therapy reduces scores for anxiety, depression, anger, fatigue, confusion, and increases the score for vigor. There's a couple other, like creativity, just feelings of happiness, like just having a just all around more positive attitude. So we found that it's a really good mood improver, which once again, I don't think surprises us when we go for a walk and come back out in the woods, we feel better, right? Improved heart function. This one's really interesting. So forest therapy has been shown to increase heart rate variability, and that's our measure of cardiovascular fitness. So the higher the heart rate variability, the higher cardiovascular fitness you have, and how the body responds to stress. Blood pressure is also stabilized by the practice. So if you have high blood pressure, the practice of forest bathing has been shown to drop it. And folks who have low blood pressure, the practice of forest bathing has been shown to increase it. So really interesting. I do want to note that in these studies, they have compared like exercise out in urban areas compared to forested areas, and they have found a significant difference in a forested area, being more beneficial in the forested area compared to the urban area. So those tests have been done. Oh, this is great. Thank you. I'm so happy. And this is just a little bit of a review of what I just said. So physiologically, we have stabilization of blood pressure, increase immune response, lower stress hormones, increase in heart rate variability, and psychologically, reduction of anxiety, relieving depression, enhancing creativity, and mood improving. So some really awesome benefits. So any questions before I move on? I know I'm giving a lot of information. I'm going to get a little more sciencey here. So we're going to talk about that class of chemical compounds, phytoncides. So first of all, when I did the meditation with you and I drizzled that oil, there were phytoncides in that, right? So that was cedar oil and pine oil. There are some plants that have more of these chemicals or more beneficial types of these chemicals, pine being one of them, cedar wood being another. So we're really lucky to live here in Bend with all these pine trees, right? So phytoncides are essential oils given off by trees, and they can have antimicrobial, insecticidal qualities. They protect trees. They protect trees from germs, parasites, insects, and there are thousands of these chemicals. So when we go out into the forest, and that's the forest bathing in the atmosphere, we're breathing in these phytoncides. We're breathing in this class of chemical compounds. And what we're finding is that they don't just protect trees, but they also protect us. To me, this seems really intuitive. I'm like, well, if we evolved outdoors, right, then we've been interacting with these chemicals over a long period of time. So it makes sense that we would have a response to those chemicals. And I always think similar to like being out in the sun helps our body produce vitamin D. Like that's kind of something similar that I think about, right? Just another effect of being inside and not getting that benefit of being outdoors. So this exposure to phytoncides has been shown to be really good for us. So here's my little organic chemistry lesson for the day. I'm just going to talk about two specific, and these are big ones, alpha-pinene and beta-pinene. So these are two really important phytoncides, and so some of the responses from these particular chemicals, they're anti-inflammatory. They reduce inflammation and oxidative stress, and they allow us to relax. They lower nervous system activity. So specifically getting into these, the beta-pinene, that's the one over here on the bottom, has been shown to reduce cortisol levels specifically. So that's stress reduction in the body and has antidepressive properties as well. Alpha-pinene, the one on top, and notice they are very similar. The one on top enhances sleep, so it helps us to sleep better. So there's some really cool effects of just these two, and that's just really touching the surface here on this class of chemicals. There's so much more that we have found these particular alpha and beta pinenes to do. Also, exposure to phytoncides has been shown to reduce blood glucose levels. So, and going outside is just obviously the best way. There's so many other benefits, but I will diffuse cedar wood in my house through my diffuser, and pine as well. So I want to talk about a little bit of the research, and I want to talk about a couple things. And the first thing is that I said before, the research is really young. We still have a lot of work to do, but some of these early findings are pretty amazing. So mental wellness is significantly improved when compared to urban settings when being in the forest. Depression, tension, anxiety, confusion, anger, hostility scores were greatly decreased. So people came out feeling better, feeling kinder, right? Feeling happier. And that was shown in 11 studies. So that was shown to be significant in 11 studies. Significant improvement when measuring stress hormones, mental health recovery, and states of emotional being were also reported. Subjects reported feeling more calm, less hostile. And then physical wellness. Once again, comparing from forest environments to urban settings, 4 studies showed decrease in blood pressure and heart rate. 7 studies showed significant increases in heart rate variability. Once again, that's that cardiovascular wellness score. And antioxidants levels showed a significant increase in one study, as did immune and inflammatory response. One study showed significant improvement in what are called high alpha brain waves. And these are our brain waves that are active when we're relaxed, in a relaxed state of mind. So some really great research being done, some really good data that's being produced on this. But once again, we just have a lot further to go on the research. Any questions about that sciencey part? That was the heaviest part of the whole thing. So. Oh yeah, no, that's a really great question. Most of it's not being done in the United States, so that's something that I have to note. I do have references on here, so you can see some of the main scientists that were involved. Dr. Ching Li is, I would say, the forefront of this research. Yeah. So I love this quote: "People protect what they love." Jacques Cousteau. And I want to talk a little bit about me and how this affects me. And I guess I'm going to just tell you a little story about me as a little being. And when I grew up in the city of Chicago. I grew up in the south side of Chicago, concrete everywhere, right? We did have a tree in our backyard that I liked to climb. And when I was a kid, I was always very attracted to nature, and there's forest preserves. I don't know if anybody's ever been in Chicago or is familiar, but there's a forest preserve, and there's these forests like scattered all around the city. And I used to beg my parents. Whenever a weekend came around to take me to this one particular forest preserve, and there was a pond there, and there was a bench, and I would sit on the bench, and there were lily pads covering the pond, and I would sit there and I would just listen to the frogs, and I was just so at peace there. And that kind of rang with me through high school, and when I went into university, I got a degree in biology, and that was I was at a smaller university, so they didn't have an environmental science. So I went into biology with an emphasis on environmental studies, and I started studying fire ecology, invasive species in the high prairie, in the tallgrass prairie ecosystems out there. So I really have always felt this deep connection with nature, and I've also done research in the high desert working on fire ecology and invasive species as well. Even with all of that time being outside, the first time I actually practiced forest bathing, something completely shifted in me. It was just like a feeling in my heart changed when I was outside. And I have spent days and days and days outside. I've spent, this pre-forest bathing, I worked in the field a lot, and there was just something different when I started connecting with that relationship, when I started developing that relationship in an intentional way. And when I think about forest bathing, I think about like all relationships with your family, with your friends. There needs to be some work involved in cultivating that. And that's what forest therapy, what forest bathing is to me. It's that cultivating of this relationship with Earth. And as I started falling more in love with our planet through this practice, I just could see how this would benefit others, not only in wellness, but how it could benefit our planet, right? Because people protect what they love. So as a way for people to really develop that relationship with our planet. So I'm going to give you a couple of self-guided practices. And once again, feel free to take a picture of these. These are just two different practices, and they're really easy to do on your own, which is why I'm offering these. And one is finding a sit spot. Did I mention that forest bathing is all about slowing down? So finding a sit spot. And this is really easy. So just make yourself comfortable, find some time and a space where you can spend at least 20 minutes. And it's not really about, it's really about getting into that sensory practice. So this isn't meant to be a meditation. It's not meant to sit there and meditate and tune into our mind and tune into those thoughts. It's meant to tune into what's around you. So when you find your sit spot, maybe touch the soil down below, maybe bring up some pine needles and smell them, maybe just gaze around, look around you, see what's happening in that area. Listen to sounds both near, maybe expand your hearing outward. Notice sounds that are far away. Be still. And the longer you sit, maybe the more encounters you might have, right? So spend some time in that sit spot and really dedicate to being present in that space. I do have some sit spot scrolls that you can grab on the way out. So they'll give you little messages during your sit spot. So you can take a sit spot and then at the end, open up your scroll and see what message it has for you. The other invitation I'd like to offer you is a forest walk. And this is meant to be a really gentle walk. So really slow. And when you do come to a guided forest bath, I start with a forest immersion practice, and then the second thing we do is we walk really slow and we tune into what's around us. So as you walk, feel connected to the earth, walk really slow. Can you walk even slower? When I am doing this forest walk, a lot of times I'll stop and I'm like, I'm not even walking at all because that's where I can engage more into my senses and what's around me. So notice what's moving. Also notice how you are a part of the motion of this forest. And sometimes I get playful. Sometimes I like to just pull a little leaf and maybe blow on some vegetation and just kind of see how I'm adding to this motion of the forest. So notice how you are a part of the motion, a part of this world, and a part of the earth. So those are two self-guided practices. There's some differences between practicing on your own and practicing with a guide. There was a study that came out that had found a significant result that folks who practiced on their own had a much more introspective experience, which makes sense, right? And folks that practiced in a group or with a guide had more of a connected experience. So, and one thing that I've also noticed, and many participants have reported, is that forest bathing doesn't just connect us more to nature, it seems to connect us more to each other as well. So I have a lot of participants who've left and contacted me later and said, you know, that really like helped in my human connections as well. So pretty cool stuff. So I have a business here called Roaming Yoga, and I offer forest bathing sessions. I also offer yoga hikes. I'm a certified yoga instructor as well, and I offer public and private events. So I have forest baths pretty much every weekend during the summer. I am a full-time high school teacher in the other months, but I still offer at least 1 to 2, usually 2 a month during the fall, winter, and spring months. So I already talked a little bit about kind of me and how I started and my life in Chicago. But I definitely want to talk about what turned me onto this, into wellness in particular. And that was when I first became a teacher. So I became a teacher 15 years ago. I taught at a high school in Las Vegas, Coronado High School. And within 1 year, and I had already been practicing yoga for many years myself. And by the end of that first year, I just noticed so much stress in my students, and it really hurt my heart to see that, and I wanted to help. So that was where I got my first yoga teacher certification, and I started guiding yoga after school as a club for students that I was teaching, and just anybody at the school who needed it. So that was in Vegas, and then I started also realizing that a lot of people in Vegas don't go out in the desert. There's beautiful places around Vegas. A lot of people don't really know that because it's just the Strip, but there's just some amazing wildland areas surrounding. So I started taking my students out in the desert with their families and just showing them what was out there and really cultivating that nature connection. When I moved here, I teach yoga in my school. I teach science and yoga as a class. Students take it as a PE or elective credit. And I started hosting these, I call them mini retreats for my students, where I take them on field trips to Shoveling Park, and I take them to Smith Rock, and we would cultivate these connections with nature together, and they just ended up being really powerful practices for everybody. And that's where my business came from. So then I was like, oh. Then COVID hit, and this was my COVID project. So I just wanted to share that more with the community. And for me, just cultivating wellness with others, I just think is so important in our busy, stressful lives, and then cultivating that outdoor connection, just something that's also so incredibly important. So if you were to take a guided forest bath, my public experiences are 2 hours in length. They start with a forest immersion meditation. It's a sensory meditation practices, and that allows you to open up and really drop into that natural world. A slow walk is the next step, once again continuing to drop into that forest environment. And after that, I offer a series of invitations. And invitations are something that are just that, invitations. You can take them or you can do something totally different, right? And they vary greatly depending on the surroundings and conditions present, but each one is going to guide you in a sensory path to the forest, so opening up your senses. And then the practice ends with a forest tea ceremony, not a traditional Japanese tea ceremony, but a tea ceremony where we share tea, I bring snacks, and we have a little food and tea in the forest. Some of the invitations, you had asked this earlier, so I'm just gonna answer. Some of the invitations I might offer, one that I find really powerful is called My Forest Home. And when the invitation goes something like this: I invite you to wander down this path and notice how the landscape changes as you move through. And sometimes I think about this, like if you're going around a corner, it's like this whole different place, or maybe you see a group of trees or rocks. And so when we look at that, thinking about your forest room, Like, how could one of these spaces be a room for you? And maybe even finding that room and settling in. The last forest home that I found had a lot of pine cones everywhere. I felt the need to kind of like tidy it up a little bit and arrange the pine cones. And when we practice with groups, I'll have people share that home with one another. So I'll have people share their homes with each other and kind of talk about how it's meaningful for them. And I love this invitation because for me, when I practice it, it makes me feel like that is my home. And it really does hit my heart in that deep, meaningful way. Some other invitations, it's summertime, so I really love scent invitations in the summertime. Just smelling everything around. One of the things I guide is it's an invitation called Forest Perfumes, and I'll give participants a little cup with water, and they can find a stick out in the forest and just take whatever you want to put in that scent. Maybe there's juniper berries on the ground or whatever that might be, and make your forest perfume, and then we share that with each other as well. I'll share one more with you. Texture gathering is super fun. So just kind of walking around and just feeling everything, feeling the bark on the trees or the leaves, and just like really exploring with that sense of touch what everything feels like around you. So those are a few that I like to share. Any questions about this? What to expect?
What kind of tea?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends. That's a really great question. Sometimes I harvest tea from local areas. So I'm excited for the manzanita berries to start coming out because they make a really tasty tea. Sometimes I use teas that are grown locally. There's a farm nearby. It's actually on the way to Sisters called Sakari Farms, and they grow with using indigenous practices, and they have some teas that I'll utilize. So it just depends on the day and what I have and what I'm feeling. Yeah, all herbal though. Yes.
Sakari Farms? How do you say
Sakari, yes, Sakari. And then food, I'll have usually, I try to stay local, so usually things that are local. Yeah, maybe some berries or other things. Okay, so here's some forest therapy resources, books to help you cultivate your relationship. Did you have all of these up there, Laurel?
Yes.
So your guide to forest bathing, the Japanese art of forest bathing, and forest bathing, how trees can help you find health and happiness. The one on the top, Amos Clifford, he's a gentleman who's really brought forest therapy to the United States. I trained with the group that the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy is, Amos Clifford is the one who started that. So that's who I trained with. But that one's really good because it has invitations in there. So you can use it as a self-guided book if you want to forest bathe on your own. And the other books are really wonderful. Forest Bathing, How Trees Can Help You Find Health and Happiness. That's by Dr. Ching Lee, who's just done some amazing work dedicated to finding some of the benefits of this practice. And then here are my references. And if you'd like to take a picture, I know you asked about some of the different scientists that I pulled some of this information from, some of the scientists who are researching and doing this work right now.